Hello and welcome to the podcast version of the Week in Review newsletter, which you can subscribe to for free at newsletter.theweekinreview.com. This is issue 11. Watching the birth of cinema? Pretty heckin' cool. A review of Lumière le Cinéma. I spent years believing that Auguste and Louis Lumière created motion pictures, that a train pulling into the station was the first public demonstration of the technology, and that people freaked the heck out when it did. I now know that these are factually incorrect. The true origin of motion pictures is fraught, and you can go down a lot of Wikipedia rabbit holes if you are so inclined. The Lumières had cataloged 652 separate shots and presented some number of them before that particular train pulled into that particular station. And if number 2 isn't true, then 3 couldn't hope to be, but I understand why the story endures. But I think there is some philosophical truth underpinning all of that. Because even though the Lumières are not responsible for the technology of capturing motion, Thierry Frémaux's new theatrically distributed video essay, Lumière le Cinéma, has convinced me that they are responsible for the art form that grew out of it. And I use that qualification with some affection, but mostly disdain. Obviously, I'm a big fan of video essays, and this is far from unique or new. I wrote about YouTube aesthetics invading film festival documentaries 14 years ago, when the New York Film Festival programmed The Shining Conspiracy Breakdown Room 237, which I liked, and The Fishing Boat Experience Leviathan, which I really didn't. Like Room 237, Lumière le Cinéma contains no new footage. It is a collection of around 100 shots captured by members of the Lumière Company, sequenced with some occasional editing, a soundtrack, and narration. This is actually a sequel of sorts. The real name of the project is Lumière, The Adventure Continues, as a follow-up to his 2017 project, Lumière, The Adventure of Cinema Begins, which I haven't seen, but sounds like it was exactly the same thing, just with a different 100 shots. Like Leviathan, Lumière le Cinéma probably could have used a little more editing. You know, the guy immediately behind me fell asleep about 30 minutes in, and though I found that snoring deeply irritating, I can't pretend I didn't get it. For the vast majority of the runtime, it is just 50-ish second shot after 50-ish second shot, few of which could be called thrilling, with a voiceover that could never be called energetic. In fact, this is the first movie I ever wished that I had seen dubbed. Like, Frémaux is a pretty bland speaker, and when the whole intent of the project is for the audiences to just experience all of these shots, the fact that at least several seconds of each one required me to read the bottom of the screen diminished its impact. And like the words were worthwhile, I just don't think it was the right way to present them to this particular non-French audience. But we should talk about those shots because this is a solid sample of what the Lumières cataloged in the decade following 1895. They are the beginning of cinema. And I think it's important how much of the beginning of cinema was the capture of life. Like, here are a bunch of people leaving a factory, 3 versions of it actually. Here's a circus family practicing in the yard. Here is a man controlling a water wheel to irrigate his rice paddy. Here are people pulling a boat, etc., etc. Some of it is inherently compelling. Circus performers, so fucking cool. Some of it, pretty boring. Here's a moving walkway. But all of it is amazing because holy shit, no one who is currently alive was alive when any of these recordings were taken. These are all a literal bygone era. And so we get to be transported across time to a Paris and New York and Tokyo and etc. that are often unrecognizable. And back then, they were the only opportunity for many people to be transported across space, something that is blindingly obvious, but I never grappled with the implications of, is that prior to the public presentation of motion pictures, people literally didn't know how the world moved. Words are wonderful, can be endlessly descriptive. Paintings and photographs can capture a feeling of movement, but if you've never experienced a big sailboat or a trolley car, you need a movie. You need the truth 24 times a second. It was actually 16 to 20 frames back then, but point stands. And this is mostly the job of people working at the Lumière Company who were set around the world to film Americans taking the tram and man in Japan watering his rice paddy. And because the Lumières were the first ones to figure out public projection, they could play these shots for the audiences elsewhere. Roger Ebert called cinema an empathy machine, and that was true from conception. The audiences got their first glimpses into others' lives and to others' cultures. For many of them, the movie theater was likely the only way they ever got those glimpses, and unfortunately, once things became more narratively driven in the years to follow, I expect the amount that your typical audience would see of those other cultures dwindled. which isn't to say that Lumiere shots were never narrative. They had all kinds of skits and bits. An early classic shows a little boy stepping on a garden hose. Weird that that's what garden hoses used to look like, which then stops it from spraying. So the gardener looks into it and the boy gets off and water face. Very, very funny. And then the fixed-ish lengths of the shots revolted in like unintentional hilarity. A boy takes too long to hit a piñata, and like he finally takes this swing as the screen cuts to black. And an official comes aboard a crude ship and completely ignores the pageantry expected to play out before the camera. So we get to see everyone on board just kind of freak out a little bit. There's a samurai-style action scene that ends with the enemies being dispatched too early. So we see the swordsman break character before presumably being told that, no, it's still rolling. And then he like jumps back into a pose. This mix of subjects and styles is what makes the project remain compelling across the 100 minutes, as long as you aren't the guy who's sitting behind me, particularly because the restoration work here is exceptional. It is a genuine tragedy that this level of care and craft cannot be put into every old film. Even worse, how few have elements good enough to do the work in the first place. Like we do see a couple of unrestored shots, including one that's just too damaged to restore. And it's sad. And with the quality of the restoration comes the revelation that many of the basics of cinematic language around staging and competition have really been there from the beginning. That this new medium came out as an art form on day one. Fremo tells us how George Méliès was at the very first public screening and immediately understood how he could use it, and that Lumiere refused to sell him a camera because he knew a rival when he saw one. The people who captured images under the Lumiere company name had to step beyond the basic rules of photography and static arts and build something new. And it's incredible what they did. And I feel genuinely lucky that I got to see their work restored on the big screen. 7.9 out of 10. Thank you for watching. Again, this is the podcast version of the Week I Review newsletter. Subscribe to for free, newsletter.theweekreview.com. You could theoretically also pay for it, whatever you want, but you don't get anything special for that. But if you subscribe, you would have gotten this weeks ago. You get all of the other things as I write them. You get hot takes that I am just not ever going to record. So yeah, join me there. I hope to write for you next time.